So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Chantal Fuqua, and I am a program director within the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, which we call IC, here at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I work on the Arise initiative. So we're very pleased to have you here for the webinar today entitled Designing Curriculum for Pre-Service Teachers and Teacher Leaders. And we're very excited to hear from our presenters today, Dr. Meltem Alamdar and Miss Nina D. Alas. And forgive me, Nina, if I pronounced that incorrectly. Before we jump into the webinar, I have a few housekeeping notes. So the presentation is being recorded. We will make the recording and the slides available on the upcoming days on our website. And the website is AAAS-arise.org. We can also put that in the chat. And then also, if you registered for the webinar, you should receive an email with a link to these materials. If you didn't register or receive this from another colleague, then you can go back in and do that. In addition, we have closed captioning for this webinar, so feel free to download and view the transcript, and you can just click on that link. It's at the top of your screen. If you have trouble with that, then please put something in the chat, and we're happy to help you. We want to give a little bit more information about AAAS and Arise if you're not familiar. So AAAS, again, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, was founded in 1848. And it's the world's largest multidisciplinary science society and the leading publisher of cutting-edge research through the journal, I think most people know, Science, basically. And we also have an additional family of journals as a complement to Science. So AAAS is dedicated to advancing science, engineering, and innovation to benefit all people. And you can find more information about AAAS at AAAS.org. And then specifically the Arise initiative stands for Advancing Research and Innovation in STEM Education of Pre-Service Teachers in High-Need School Districts. It seeks to provide resources, tools, and a community to foster research and evidence-based innovation in STEM teacher education and leadership programs. And also to make sure you're aware, I'm sure if you hear, that the Arise Network, it really builds on the AAAS provisions of technical assistance to the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholar Program, which had an anniversary actually at the past summit of 20 years. And purposely, we're saying that we're collecting and sharing information, just really providing a continuum for the community around topics, strategies, and research and evidence-based practices. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our speakers. Please welcome them. And also feel free to follow us on social media. So we actually have information on Twitter, also on LinkedIn, and YouTube. So look for us there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chantal, for introducing us today. Thank you all for joining us today. My colleague Nina and I are very excited about hosting this workshop. We are here to share our experiences and knowledge evaluating Noyce projects, and hopefully this will help you to inform, improve, and sustain your Noyce projects in the future. Nina and I did another colleague who cannot join us today, Kavita, we did a very similar workshop in person in July during the Noyce Summit. It was very well attended. So we thank AAAS inviting us back and giving us an opportunity to conduct this workshop again online with a larger group. Nina will next talk to you more about the overview of our workshop and what we will try to accomplish together today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Meltem. So during this first part of the workshop, we understand if you need to turn off your camera, grab an afternoon cup of tea or coffee, or stretch as you see fit. We will break periodically for Q&A. We also hope that you will stay engaged throughout, and particularly when we get to the breakout sessions, in which you get to choose which group you would like to participate in. To prepare for that part of the workshop, I'm going to ask you to rename yourself using the model below as shown. So if you look at your chat, and you can see also in my name, you can see one hyphen my name, Nina Dallas Ellis, comma MNA. So this will help us when we get to that part of the program. And as Melton mentioned, if you have taken part of the in-person session in Noyce Summit back in June, thank you so much for joining again. While many of the points we present today is going to sound very familiar to you, we actually expanded our presentation to go into some items a little bit more deeply. So we hope that this, as well as the breakout session, will be valuable to you. Next slide. So M&A has a long history with Noyce grant projects as shown. Besides Kavita and me, other staff members, Amlan Banerjee, Debbie Ngambor, Megan Hill-Sunday, Krishna Narella, have worked on these projects and other teacher preparation programs, including TQP projects from the Department of Ed and TIF grants. M&A staff also have experience with teacher professional development grants and policies. Next slide.
And I am a research faculty at Georgia Tech at the Center for Education, Integrating Science, Mathematics, and Computing. And I direct a large group of around 10 researchers, education researchers, and evaluators. We mainly focus on STEM evaluation. With my colleagues at Georgia Tech at SEISMEC, in the past, we evaluated 5 Track 2 and Track 3 Noyce projects. Across these projects, I gained very valuable insight, some of the gaps in the literature to focus on as part of the research. In 2016, Noyce Solicitation came up with a new category, which is Track 4, focusing on researching Noyce teachers, but also in-service teachers, retention and retainment in the STEM field after they complete the program. So as a PI, I submitted a research grant, and as a PI, it got funded. So it just ended in last April, which was a 4-year-long project, which really helped us to research the Noyce teacher networks and its impact on retention across the nation. I am also currently an advisory board for a Track 4 Noyce grant. So we are hoping that all our these experiences today will be really valuable for telling you what to include in the evaluation, pay attention in the evaluation, but asking the right questions as part of Noyce projects. Next slide, please. I also want to apologize for my voice. I'm still recovering from a cold, so you will occasionally might hear my coughs during the presentation. So in this, we want to start the section by providing you the evaluation approaches by Noyce tracks to show you what type of each track evaluation actually focuses on and what type of evaluation questions guides the evaluation. Next slide, please. The first one is capacity building. I have not looked at all the participants' names. Hopefully you are renaming your name to include what track that you are interested in or presenting here today. But the first one is capacity building. As you might know, these are small projects, but the evaluation plays an important role since these grants lead to the submission of larger Noyce grants. So the data that is collected as part of the evaluation is very important, guiding you to write the larger Noyce grants. This grants evaluation focuses is most usually monitoring of the institutional change. Data collection usually focused on institutional level and faculty involvement. And these are the type of questions that evaluation focuses on during these projects. For instance, to what extent has progress been made towards sustaining or scaling up project activities? Because most of these projects focus on piloting some project activities and hopefully scaling them up with a larger grant. Looking at the stakeholders view the project as viable option for the partner institutions. It also focused on the recruitment. And also lastly, they had the institution develop the capacity for voice, which is the focus of the grant to figure out what type of capacity they need, what type of infrastructure they need to have in place to be able to submit a larger grant. And in that regard, evaluation is very valuable to look at the institutional level barriers and challenges and provide in-time data to the team that will help them to come up with some solutions for these barriers and challenges, but how to restructure it to apply for a larger grant. Next slide, please.
So based upon the registration that we've seen, many of you are working on track 1 projects that are focused on increasing the number of STEM quality teachers to teach math, science in elementary and secondary grades. So as a result, the evaluation focuses on 2 main areas. One is monitoring outreach, recruitment, selection, training, supports, and program completion of teacher candidates, and monitoring retention of graduates as teachers of record at high-need schools. And 2, collecting data on project activities, individual teacher candidates, program staff, faculty, and district partners engagement. You see before you the types of evaluation questions for track 1 that you will encounter. When talking about the benefits of the program, we're looking not only just a stipend and the courses that teacher candidates take, but the particular characteristics of program design that would enable the Noyce scholars to be successful in entering and persisting in teaching profession. Program characteristics may include DEI activities or diversity, equity, inclusion, induction, monitoring or peer supports, internship and job placements, and structures and personnel showing program and school district engagement and collaboration in support of Noyce scholars and the schools and school districts they serve. Next slide, please.
And there are a lot of projects that after they get track 1, they actually also apply for a track 2. Again, from the registration, we know that there are a lot less people here representing track 2 and track 3. But in track 2, again, the focus is to develop K-12 STEM teachers in high-need schools. But this track is open to Noyce eligible STEM professionals. So there are a lot of career changes. The recruitment plays a huge role in this track, since the commitment for the length of required teaching is longer than track 1. In track 1, the requirement is 2 years. In track 2, it is 4 years. As a result, the evaluation data becomes very important to provide formative data to structure the program. Also, the retain the teachers that are recruited in the program. Also, the summative data about the project. In this track, it is important to select an evaluation framework in the early stages of the evaluation design. We will talk more about what are some evaluation frameworks in the field and often used as part of Noyce projects. And it is also important to develop a logic model with the program leadership and the stakeholders. As I mentioned, the recruitment and retention of the fellows are really important. It is a huge commitment to be part of this project. Therefore, it becomes really important to document these strategies, the meeting notes, recruitment events, flyers, even the interviews of the applicants the fellows by STEM faculty becomes the important data. It is also important to document how the proposed Noyce programs is adding a value to teaching fellows education. Most of the time, the program is structured in a way that the teaching fellows are actually part of a larger master program in teacher preparation departments. So it is important when collecting the data, how Noyce is adding a value, how it is different from their teacher preparation programs. Usually in this track, what I have seen in the field, what I have done when I was evaluating them is choosing a readily developed survey because the program doesn't allow a lot of funding, but also time to develop a new survey. Typically, people really look at the teacher self-efficacy, the teaching self-efficacy. So there's a lot of ready surveys that you can adapt from the field. Another thing to keep in mind that conducting pre-post surveys and follow-up surveys are important. So we recommend at least 3 time points for the teaching fellows to be surveyed throughout the program. And again, because this is a longer term program, developing a formative data reporting cycle becomes very important. Next slide, please. Track 3, which is the Master Teaching Fellowships programs. Track 2 focuses on developing K-12 STEM teacher leaders in high-need schools. It is open to in-service K-12 STEM teachers. Again, the commitment is long, 5 years. Because of the length of the program, the evaluation is very comprehensive. These are usually a small number of cohorts because the evaluation, the project is very tailored to the needs of the teachers. And the evaluation is designed to capture this individual program characteristics. Again, selecting an evaluation framework in the early stages of the evaluation design is very important. In my experience, I work very closely with the program leaders, the PIs, and other faculty to develop a conceptual model instead of a logic model. We develop a conceptual framework and theory of change because they were also developing the program characteristics and the components. When they were providing at the same time when they were providing the program to the participants. We used some theories to guide the evaluation questions. So I will definitely recommend considering some guiding theories. Again, the recruitment and the retention of the MTS are so important. This needs to be captured as part of the evaluation. And in my experience, usually NSF is very interested in documenting those efforts. Because it is a very small cohort and it is a very intense program, it is also important to develop and implement a longitudinal data collection plan, both for surveys, qualitative data and quantitative data. In this project, the survey might include some new skills that are specific to the program. Maintaining rigorous involvement with program planning and activities also is very important. These programs, as I mentioned, that is the structure of the program and the content of the program is also developed while they are also providing to the participants. And again, in this program, I find it very valuable to develop a formative data reporting cycle to make sure the program changes and theory of change model is captured. Next slide, please. These are the type of evaluation questions that we ask in track 2 and track 3. They are very similar. As you can see, we asked to what extent the TFs, the track 2, apply new ideas, knowledge, information, classroom practices. In both tracks, there's a huge emphasis on classroom practices and changes, and usually evaluation captures should capture that data. As I mentioned, self-efficacy in teaching is a very common construct that is captured in this type of projects. If you have attended Noyce meetings in the past, there's a lot of research results, or you can see in the posters about teacher self-efficacy. Also, the program, the other questions that we focus on is, well, to what extent the participants feel prepared to teach, because again, the program focused on STEM content, instructional changes. It is important to capture the program impact and motivation to teach. As you know, that Noyce's biggest focus is retaining these teachers in the field, and also to provide data about how the MTS and MTS both tracks participants prepare to teach and their learning in the classroom. There is also emphasis on how the professional development the programs are providing is translated into the classroom, whether or not teachers are able to actually put them in action. And the last track is a track 4, which Nina will talk more about it.
So thank you, Meltem. So track 4 projects enable exploratory studies and research projects that address STEM teacher effectiveness and retention in high need LEAs. The research that track 4 projects conduct may examine teacher candidate characteristics and or programmatic features that are shown to result in effective teachers who persist in teaching high needs LEAs. Track 4 must include substantive collaboration among education researchers, faculty members or persons with expertise in STEM discipline, and faculty members or persons with expertise in STEM education. So one thing that's unusual about track 4 is that track 4 projects focus in conducting research on Noyce projects, typically across multiple institutions. Thus, the focus for track 4 evaluation is on how the research team is conducting research, how the research team is meeting its research goals and objectives, and how the projects as a whole is making an impact on the field. So you see here before you some of the evaluation questions for track 4 projects that guide the evaluation. So they're looking at, for example, to what extent are components of the research project consistent with the needs for research and aligned with the common guidelines? Now that is a publication available that is created, presented by Department of Ed's NCIS and NSF. It's readily available online. And the key thing about this is that for track 4, it's important to emphasize that as the evaluator or advisory board member, you are not conducting an evaluation or research on the Noyce projects. You, the evaluator or board member, is a critical friend providing input to the research team, not on teacher preparation programs themselves. For the evaluation of a track 4 project, it is important to apply an evaluation framework that fits the project research. For example, if a track 4 project includes a partnership among the collaborating institutions, then the evaluation may want to adopt an evaluation framework to assess how the partner is working or progressing. Among the partnership frameworks available are those that address communities of practice and research practice partnerships. Meltem, I know you work with as an advisory board member, so is there anything else to add?
Yeah, this is the only track NSF, I believe, allows for Noyce projects either to have an external evaluator or an advisory board. In my research, when I was a PI for my research grant, I only had an advisory board, which you can also include some of the evaluators. And currently I am on an advisory board for track 4 grant, Noyce grant, which again, I'm representing my experience in evaluation and research methodology as part of the member But this is the only track that you have a choice of either having an external evaluator or advisory board. And there are pros and cons of both. External evaluator, because you put in a good budget for them to be involved more substantially into your grant. So there is a benefit. Whereas advisory board comes together a couple of times a year. So there's a lot less involvement, a lot less support for your project. So you have to kind of decide what will be the best for your project that you're proposing.
Mhm. So with that, we'll take a pause here and ask if you have any questions over the different types of evaluation approaches by the tracks. Feel free to use the chat. So if there are no other further questions, we'll go ahead and feel free, we'll stop again, but we'll continue on with evaluation frameworks.
Yes, Nina and I and Kavita, we decided that it will be great to talk about evaluation frameworks. As evaluators, we feel that sometimes the evaluation frameworks are not taught enough in the field, and it can be oversight, but they are very important for setting the foundation to conduct an comprehensive evaluation. When it is paired with your program's logic model, they become very useful and powerful. We are providing a few here. There are a lot more in the field, but some of the commonly used evaluation frameworks that are by M&A and us in my work, our vast majority of projects are CRE, the Culture Relevant Evaluation Framework, the SIP, and Kirkpatrick's models. I personally use theory-driven and utilization-focused evaluation when I was evaluating Track 2 and Track 2 evaluations. And this is just a very brief introduction, just to give you an idea of like what they are. There are a lot of books and resources about them. So this will not be, this might not make sense right now too much, but bear with us. They are really useful, and when they are used very commonly, it really helps to structure the program really well. The culture relevant evaluation framework supports that in conducting any evaluation, it is very important to not only consider, but center cultural context in which the project and the participant operate and be responsible to its evaluator. Therefore, stakeholders in the program play a critical role in all aspects of the evaluation work, from its design and planning phase to framing the evaluation questions, both formative and summative. The co-development of the tools and instruments and the sharing voices and data information for evaluation that is both authentic and substantial collaboration among the education researchers, the faculty members with expertise in STEM discipline, and the faculty members with expertise in STEM education becomes very important. The SIP framework, which stands for context, input, process, and product, is a much more linear process for assessing the efficacy and efficiency of a project, and follows the program's logic model very closely to judge the program's value. This model aims to address questions like what should we do, how we should do it, is we are doing it, are we doing it as planned, did the program work? And the Kirkpatrick model is a more proper when designing the evaluation of a training profession development activity within a program. It has wider usage in the evaluation processes when used to assessing the planning to implementation aspects of the project. The model itself has 4 levels: reaction, learning, behavioral, and results. And theory-driven evaluation, which is kind of the name gives it away, is designed to use a validated theory to guide the evaluation. A common practice in theory-driven evaluation approaches the logic modeling a program's theory at the beginning of the evaluation. When practicing theory-driven evaluation, the evaluator again works very closely with key stakeholders to describe the program's theories, and it can be multiple theories, to formulate and prioritize evaluation questions and collect data to answer these questions. Another approach is utilization-focused evaluation. This evaluation framework begins with the premises that evaluation should be judged by their utility and actual use. This framework developed by Dr. Patton is an approach based on the principle that an evaluation should be judged and its use on its useness on its intended users. So it is designed and planned to be used by the stakeholders. In my experience evaluating a track 3 Noyce project, I use theory-driven evaluation and the utilization focus evaluation. In fact, with the PIs of the project and myself and other evaluator, Chris Capelli, we wrote a paper about how we utilize this framework within the track 3 Noyce project. And a few years ago, I also my colleague wrote a blog about why the evaluation frameworks matters. So I will definitely check them out to see our experience, how we use these frameworks in the field. Again, as I said, these frameworks are big and very comprehensive. You definitely need to research more about them, but they are very useful. Nina, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, just a few quick points. As I mentioned earlier when we were discussing about track 4, if you're engaged with partnerships and part of the investigation is on the partnerships itself, there are some research frameworks that deal with communities of practice, research practice partnerships, and I've listed them they're listed in the meeting chat for some of those sources. And just to highlight, so the Research Practice Partnership Evaluation Framework from Henrik et al. And that's based upon the work that they did with the William T. Grant Foundation. We have the Wilder Collaboration Factors Inventory that's supported by the Amherst Wilder Foundation. And then the famous work of the Wenger, McDermott, and Snyder on communities of practice. So feel free to seek those publications out after this session. Next.
I see a question in the chat asked by Jamie. What is meant by focuses on an evaluation framework in the early stages of evaluation design? I think it's a great question. What I meant, or what we meant by this, is that when writing the evaluation section, like from very early stages, sometimes the evaluation frameworks come into the play after the grant gets funded. But I will highly recommend when you are negotiating the evaluation plan or designing the evaluation, writing in the grant, think about what frameworks might be guiding your evaluation design.
And part of that is actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is you engage your evaluation and your evaluator early in the process as you're preparing for your proposal. So that way you can have that in sync, simultaneous conversation as well as development of the evaluation plan with the activities, with including the evaluation framework as you're putting together that proposal.
Yeah, because evaluation frameworks really helps you what type of questions and how often you want to collect this data, build in formative data collection and the cycles. So it is, as Nina said, it is very important from the early at the grant writing process to include the evaluators. My experience, I'm sure Nina will agree that our participation during the grant writing actually is very useful to think about program goals and objectives and how that can be captured by evaluation.
So moving forward, next slide. So we turn now we're shifting and transitioning to our breakout sessions. So we're going to be dynamic here because, well, we don't know how many people are going to be in which, and so we'll find out as things go on. So first way to find out is by taking a poll. So next slide, please. Sarah, did we skip this poll? Okay. Okay, I think are we missing one slide? Okay. Well, in any event, so for in this case, we want to make sure that for kind of preparing ourselves for the breakout is to highlight a few considerations during the breakout discussion. So we're going to try to be succinct with our time, and we'll keep tabs on that. And as much as we can, at the maximum, set aside 18 minutes for the breakout session. Then we'll include sharing out at the end with the whole group. We want to definitely highlight some creativity and flexibility, some of our troubleshooting. And so thinking outside a box is highly encouraged. And we love to hear different perspectives and contexts, but at the same time be mindful of people's opportunity to share. So we'll like to observe the pick up the mic, put down the mic kind of courtesy for everyone involved. And we want to be also future oriented because while present conditions may improve for some time and not so in others, we want to make sure that all projects have the opportunity to grow and mature and stay focused on what can be sustainable beyond this funding. And as we'll often share and see, change is constant. So let's go back to that poll again, if we can, to the poll slide. And what we want to do is ask you, what is the current state of your grant project's implementation? So if you click on where you are, we can find that out. So are you currently in progress, on track with modification, behind schedule, not yet started, ending, or you're planning to, and using this workshop as a means of gathering information? So it's great to see that most of you all are on track. But it's also wonderful to see so many people who are in the process and thinking about applying for a Noyce grant. And for those who say they're in progress, on track with modifications, your stories will be very, very interesting and useful when we get out to the breakout sessions. So thank you. It's good to see that everyone is, the majority are on track. Thank you. So next slide, please. Next slide.
I also saw a couple of people that their projects might be ending. I think their experience will be also very useful in the breakout sections too. We want to give you a little bit overview of the tools and the instruments. Typically, the commonly used data collection tools and instruments we have utilized in most of our current and past Noyce projects for both formative and summative evaluations are online pre-post surveys, this extent scholar data, demographics, participation logs, classroom observations, assessments, focusing on content, accessing meeting and project documents, observations, and the site visits as needed. One of the critical things to keep in mind is the budget allocation for these activities in the Noyce grant. I'm sure as a PI or evaluator, you are already know that there's no mandated evaluation budget for Noyce projects. So how comprehensive your Noyce project is really depends on the budget. Oftentimes, Noyce grants doesn't allow a lot of funding set aside. We know that majority of funding goes to as a stipends to the participants, but it is important to set aside a good funding, or talk to your evaluators about utilizing maybe some internal support to do a good comprehensive evaluation. But definitely you need a substantial budget to conduct a rigorous evaluation. For instance, traveling to the site to collect data such as classroom observations, interviews, focus groups can be very time consuming and very costly. Hence, the evaluator and the PI should heed caution by scooping out of the project and setting up the expectations and the deliverables to do the evaluation. We also learned, because of COVID, we also have a lot of experience now that most of the data can be possibly collected offline, remotely, or in the collaboration with the project team members, such as administering surveys to the scholars and the project members. But that will be members, but the data is definitely, the surveys or data are hosted on evaluator servers for confidential purposes. So the virtual means to conduct observation and focus group can be employed to save both data and both time and money for the project. Most of these tools or instruments are definitely applicable to capacity building track 1 and 2 and 3 of the projects. Nina, do you have anything else to add about tools and instruments?
Yes, just quickly, just want to point out that some of the things that you might want to consider with these tools is also how to ease the data burden for institutions and the personnel involved in responding, from the Noyce scholars to faculty and administrators. So when is a good time to collect that information is just as critical as what is being collected. For example, if you're collecting completed observation performance rubrics from the cooperative supervisor or the mentor teacher, is it better to collect it at the end of the semester or as soon as they were submitted, or when they are about to be submitted in an electronic database system like TaskStream? So those are some things to consider. And as much as possible, because of the limitations of funding, sometimes is how to piggyback. And in that way, also you ease the burden for everyone engaged. Next slide, please. So challenges to project implementation and evaluation go hand in hand. And so what you see here are broadly speaking, the 5 categories that issues kind of surface. So you have technical issues, as exemplified by how do you observe teacher candidates virtually during the COVID pandemic at its height. Processes that sometimes make things so much harder. Institutional process like MOUs, procurement and hiring, staff turnovers, infrastructure inefficiencies. So these can be things like, for example, in cases where the institution requires a bidding process, even though the evaluator has already been named in the project. So that adds another layer of time and some uncertainty before getting the evaluation started. It can have IRB processes that take far longer than anticipated. And in some cases, you discover that if you were a PI, that the offices and the processes managing scholarships and sponsored programs and research reside in 2 different places and 2 different ways. And as a PI, you may have to be navigating through all of that to make things work. And so that also impacts your evaluation. Next slide, please. So for PIs and evaluators, what does the evaluator need to know to report on the implementation and outcomes of the grant projects accurately? So you can see here as some of those kind of issues that can come about, whether it's changes in baseline, circumstances with teacher candidates, project staff turnover, changes in policies. Those are some of the things that as an evaluator, I can say is these are things that I try to keep in mind. And hopefully a PI will also keep in mind. For example, in one project, state policy and law changed that influenced how the project is going to move forward. Thankfully, the project is already in alignment at the time when that legislation came about. But those are some of the considerations that need to be also included in the evaluation. And then looking at ways that those kind of concerns and solutions are being captured somehow. And as always, think about how is this grant going to be sustained when the project funding eventually ends. And so, for example, did you find that certain outreach activities were more successful in drawing candidates to your program? How can you continue to support those activities beyond the grant? Next slide, please. So we're going to then take those 5 categories and ask you to consider taking one strategy or activity you would like to consult with a peer grantee. Well, in this case, it's going to be a group of you in a breakout session, and to share best practices according to that concern. And then the groups that you're going to be in, you're going to be breaking down to the tracks that you've selected, either capacity, building, track 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then once you're broken into those tracks, we're going to take a look at these kind of evaluation questions. If you could move to the next slide, please. What are the implications then for evaluation for those concerns that you brought up and those strategies? What does the evaluator need to know in order for them to report the implementation and outcomes of the grant projects accurately? How is your project capturing those concerns and solutions? Hint, meeting notes really, really help. And then what aspect of the grant will continue after the funding ends? So, for example, the curricula, internship placement practices, practice exam supports, and so on. So with that, we'll try to reserve Do we have 18 minutes?
Hi, everyone. I think the majority of people that stayed with us are back.
Okay.
I'm glad that we didn't lose a lot of people. That's great. And I know that from our group, maybe the time wasn't enough. But I hope that there was some learning moments, the sharing moments. And do we have 4 groups or 5 groups? I think there's no track 4 group. Is that correct, Lauren?
Yeah, we ended up having 3 groups.
3 groups. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Who would like to share? I guess we should start from track 1 to report back on your discussion within your group.
Well, let me get started. And for those who are in track 1, feel free to chip in, because I think what has happened is we had some people who got pulled into another group. And so we'll see what happens. And I think we kind of didn't get to in as much as some of the questions, but just to give you an idea of some of the issues that we've discussed is, one was the budget for track 1, and comes about is to, how to go about doing an evaluation well when you have, for example, maybe 9 to 10K a year for a 5-year project. And if you are in a rural setting, traveling is a costly matter. So some of the ways you can go about it that's been discussed is doing it virtually, and having working with the school and school districts to allow for virtual observations. Also is to triangulate data using things like surveys. If they are already doing observations using videos and video recording, and then doing a recall of that as part of the observations that's being conducted by a teacher supervisor or teacher mentor, if you can get access to that. And so those are some of the aspects. And then I think one thing also, we kind of got caught off and discussed, and Robert was asking this question about using statements to, and whether or not you need one evaluator or a panel of evaluators. So statements for the say for I don't know whether if this is for preliminarily, like when you are bringing them in into the program, and that's been mostly the evaluator examining those kind of personal statements to see what got them to be interested in applying and participating in a Noyce project. And they bring out some interesting aspects that can indicate whether or not they will be persisting later on. But I've only conducted it as maybe as a solitary evaluator in that process, and not as a panel. I don't know if anyone else has tried it with a panel. In terms for statement on the exit end, I've not had experience doing that, so been open to anybody who is looking into that. So Robert, if you want to kind of add more to your question, feel free. But that's all we have for now.
You summarized it well. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Meltem?
Sorry, I muted myself from coughing. I think we have another spokesperson from track 2, track 3.
So I'll be kind of brief. I think there's 2 main points that came out of our discussion, and I think we focused more on process aspects rather than specific issues. And one thing that came up is the fact that your program officer is always willing to help whenever you do see issues, whether it's data collection or changes in approach to the program, whatever may become necessary, really letting that person know and bring them into the conversation. They can help problem solve as well. And the other thing, we talked about some aspects of the impact of the pandemic and having to shift to remote operations and how that the implications that had for data collection and so forth. But there's also been some positives, and one example of that is, at least in our case, our evaluator has traditionally joined us for 1 or 2 leadership team meetings per semester. And once we shifted to having our meetings online by Zoom or Teams, she joined us much more frequently and became much more aware of how we operate. And by the way, she's with us. It's Lee D'Amico. And we very much appreciated that. She was always a team member, but that was even more evident when we shifted to online meetings.
Molly, do you want to add anything? Kelly's notes? One of the things that was mentioned, so we have actually a few people who are currently track 1 grantees, but planning to submit track 3. And one of the things that they brought up, and it was also in a discussion about the access to data, the test scores being challenged and a concern, and how to deal with it. That was, I think, the one other point that was discussed as part of the track 2. Anything else from track 2 and 3 group that like to add to the discussion before we move into the third group?
So there was a second track 1, I think. Did you all have another conversation? And was there any other issues that were not raised?
So Nina, we were I believe the second track 1. So I thought it was capacity building at first, but I realized that they were being sent to that room. I think there were 2 things that came to the forefront, which I feel like have already been mentioned, is the difficulty to recruit basically Noyce scholars. And then, trying to figure out basically after you proposed all these wonderful things in the grant, how to be able to fit those in and really execute them, because like you mentioned, the pandemic, things have changed. And then we had one colleague that expressed challenges in, being able to really absorb the feedback that they had received from review. So they had submitted and unfortunately been unsuccessful. And they're just, trying to find support, I would think, from the Noyce community, basically, and consider whether they want to resubmit again. Yeah.
So Those are, so when in terms of talking about recruitment, I know I have worked with a number of projects that has had those difficulties, and I've worked in another project that they didn't have any of that. So for the ones who are trying to document where you've had difficulties, is take a look at a trend data. Have they always had difficulty, recruiting teachers? And so it might not just be is that, this is a prolonged ongoing issue that, and despite all the efforts, there's just doesn't seem to be any great interest in that community, despite the, all the efforts being made to recruit teachers, into that community. The other thing too would be is, yes, we still have the side effects of the pandemic. So you might want to have to, think about that, and that might have a lingering effect. The third thing is, and this is going to, the one that has been successful is you use their teacher, the new teacher preparation program, and it's not Noyce, but it's another one, is as an incubator for all the other teacher preparation programs they have at that institution. And so with that funding, they're able to do some really creative things in terms of recruiting, thinking outside the box, looking at, whether looking at advertising to veterans, advertising through Indeed, putting out bulletin boards, because this is, because they're in a rural setting. And so that's one way. We're doing radio and podcasts kind of announcements. They were going all out, and they were reaching out to also to the school districts and being involved in the school districts kind of recruitment and kind of job affairs. And so those things helped kind of generate a lot of interest, and that resulted in increased number of people participating into their project. And so, and it looks like it will, as part of it, some continuing effects after the grant ends. So, that's one thing that for those who are thinking about applying is, how does your Noyce project as part of the, sustainability over time fit into the strategic plan of that institution's overall, increasing the number of teachers in your community? Because in some aspect it's a grow your own, right? So, being able to then do that and, harness those types of things in support of increasing the number of teachers available in that community over time.
Yeah. And make sure that your evaluation captures this recruitment strategies. NSF is always very interested in. They ask evaluators and the program PIs to report on the recruitment. As Nina shared her valuable experience, that the other programs, before they try out different strategies, they can be aware of these and will be helpful.
Yeah.
We have around 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. So let's go on quickly. So next slide, please. So, and just so you know, these slides will be available to you, so you'll look at them later on. But these are some, when we put together the summit over the summer, these are some of the other issues and approaches that were highlighted. And next slide. So these are some of the lessons learned from the field. And you can see here that, these are common sense items there. You need to expect to make adjustments. There's going to be obstacles. The key thing here is your project officer at NSF is a valuable ally, particularly if you're talking about budgets, and sometimes you're battling with your own institution about budgets. And so your project officer can be an ally to your efforts. Next slide, please. And some of these bullet points you're probably familiar with because they're good procedures when it comes to project management. So I encourage you all to look into that. But the key takeaway for all of this is that third bullet and the fourth bullet, which is basically your evaluator is your partner in all of this. And so being able to communicate with them clearly, often and early and regularly is critical. So if you can, bring them on board early while you're putting together your project proposal, and then getting them on board as quickly as you can. So getting that signed statement of work and moving forward. And so then they're working with you in tandem as you're planning and implementing your project. Next slide, please. We've kind of put together some additional resources here, and feel free to use your phone or iPad, but we also, I think, put them together, thank you, Betty, in the chat. So there you have your URL links. And next slide. This is something that we've kind of been put together, that's been introduced to us. So we thought this workshop is really just a jumping off point. And so if you're bringing this to a larger group of your colleagues, this might be something to start that conversation. So you were thinking about this, and now based upon this conversation that we've had today, now you think this way. And then, so you will do this. So feel free to take that as a conversation starter. Next slide, please. And if you have any additional questions, here's how you can reach us. So we thank you for being part of this and this little workshop, and hope we've been instrumental in kind of illuminating all that's part of the evaluation of Noyce projects.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. Please reach out. I feel like we thought the time will be enough, but apparently we have a lot to share. So we would love to talk to you more about your projects. I heard, especially in our section, that people are planning to submit grants. We will be happy to talk to you further about our experience. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And Lauren, if you could share the survey, that would be great.
Yes, please take the survey. We did this workshop, as we said, in person. So we try to translate the online setting. So please feel free to give us feedback. And thank you for our AAA's partners helping us to coordinate and facilitate this workshop today.
Thank you so much, Meltem and Nita. So yes, we have shared the information. Please follow us on social media, check out the website. If you have additional questions, feedback, email us at noyce@AAAS.org. I think that's pretty much it. We hope that you found some value in this. If you enjoyed this webinar, please fill out the survey link. Let us know more of what you would like to see, okay? Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.